Welcome back to Trackside Conversations. Today is a bit of a milestone for the podcast because I'm joined by our very first guest, and I couldn't think of a better conversation to kickstart things off. Joining me today is Rob Mawby. I won't tell you too much about Rob, and I'll leave that for him to do. However, Rob does bring a wealth of experience from across the railway, particularly around operations, training, and developing the people and skills our industry needs. Today's podcast theme is People Make It Happen, building the skills, competence, and leadership for the railway of tomorrow. Today, we're going to be talking about people, competence, and leadership, how we attract and develop people, how we build and maintain competence, and what good leadership looks like as the railway continues to evolve. Rob, welcome to Trackside Conversations. It's great to have you on.
Alan, thanks for having us on. And to be fair, it is a complete pleasure to be invited to come and talk on this so early on in the podcast journey. So, thanks for having us.
No, absolutely. I appreciate that. So to start us off, Rob, for those listening who might not know you, can you give us, the viewers, a little introduction and a bit about your background?
Yeah, no problem. A bit about my background. So I started my railway career back in 2001, probably very similar sort of time to yourself. I started as a depot driver, where that was the first introduction into railway. The company that I worked for, the progression to be a mainline driver was through becoming a depot driver, first of all. And that was I suppose, an apprenticeship into the railway, because we learned 90% of the driver's role, but it meant that we could be in a safer environment, that it was controlled. We were at lower speed in the depots. And then after about 7 to 8 months, my cohort, my group, we progressed on to mainline. So I became a mainline driver early 2002. Loved driving trains. In fact, I still drive trains today. I still maintain and hold my competence today. I don't drive trains daily, but I still maintain that. And I'll go more on to the reason why a little bit later on in the podcast, I'm sure. I was a driver for about 7 to 8 years, became a driver instructor, which is the natural progression if you want to move up through the railway career. And that really hones down on the training and development of new people. It's easy to train people rules and regulations and how to drive trains, but remembering that the people that we're now training are very new into the industry as well. Some direct from the street, others have got some railway experience from different fields, different parts of the industry, but predominantly most of the people are new to the railway. So you start honing your skills on how to engage with people and how to develop people. And that was a really good learning point in my career of how to engage with people better. From then I moved on to be a trainer, where I learned the early days of simulators being used within the railway. So when new trains come in, the industry procures simulators. So we had 4 simulators at our training centre, because we had 4 different types of rolling stock. And for 2 to 3 years, I was part of the classroom delivery of training drivers. And then moved on to become a driver manager. And that was, again, back at the coalface, where I'm then leading a team of drivers who I have to maintain their competence with them. I have to develop them. And traditionally, the railway has been very much that you are pass these questions and then you're a qualified driver that you can demonstrate with experience. At that point, we started to move on more about developmental competence and how to continually develop people, rather than telling people that they've always done wrong, but how to focus on how to develop people going forward and take a bit of ownership of their own learning and development as well. When I was a trainer, I worked for a guy called Justin Willett. Justin had moved over to another organisation. And I'm still in contact with Justin today. And he then advertised for a job, and I moved from the driver manager role to an ops standards role. And that role fundamentally is about making sure the policies and procedures are aligned to modern practices and incident investigation and how railways run from a safety perspective. And to be fair, I didn't think I would get the job. but I'd showed willingness, keenness, and just in the same vein, see some potential in me and thought actually I could train him to be a very good and op standards manager, which and I learned quite a lot from Justin. Um, from then, I moved back to my old area, which was the Great Eastern, and that's because Crossrail was starting up. And before Crossrail, or what it was, the TfL rail, and now what we know as the Elizabeth line, I was part of the mobilisation team. So I was very early doors into that organisation. And my job there initially was leading the depots where we were 2Ping drivers over from another train operating company to start the network running, which again was TfL rail originally. And then I moved on to more of the driver strategy. And what that was about ensuring that because we were bringing in new trains, we were bringing in 2 new signalling systems, plus existing signalling systems. We had approximately 80 drivers that were already competent, but we needed to recruit off the street. And part of our commitment was recruiting from the areas which Crossrail was operating in, or as it now is the Elizabeth line. We had to recruit 450 drivers from those areas. So we had a huge recruitment drive, making sure that we can get the right people. And if I give you some numbers, we had for the first 120 jobs that we were recruiting for the first year, we had 16,000 people apply for the jobs from all over the country. But we needed to recruit within 40 minutes of each of the depots, which was Old Oak, Common, Paddington, Shenfield, Gidea Park, and Ilford. And so the key was that because TfL was paying for Crossrail and government was paying for Crossrail, we had to quite rightly diverse recruit from the areas that the network was supplying the service to. And so, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. Then I had an opportunity whilst, and this was just before COVID, so early 2020, I had the opportunity to go and work out in Saudi Arabia, and that was a brilliant experience. So that was through RPD, Rail Professional Development, who I work with now. I was there to support the design and development of our accident investigation program to deliver to Saudi Arabian Railways. So we went out, we designed a course, we developed the course while we were there, and then delivered a pilot course, which we was then due to roll out across the region. Unfortunately, COVID hit and everywhere locked down, as we know, at that point in time. And so we never got to fulfill any more of that at that period of time. But it was a great experience. And I came back from that thinking, I love the ability to be able to go and work all over the world. I love the ability to be able to help people that are in various different regions, and not just the, if you like, the day-to-day role of working in a department. And so I took the choice to have my notice in with full support from Elizabeth Line that I worked for at the time. Set up a few contracts, and one of those was setting up the Rail Professional Development Driver Training Centre, and that early in 2020, we designed and developed training programs, which, to be fair, we have done for best part of the last 20 years as an organisation, Rail Professional Development, and that was designed to be a short program. When I mean short, is in it was only supposed to be for a couple of years to support a few operators to help with their driver numbers, but it's gone from success to success, and we've just started our 18th cohort of drivers. We've put through our training program circa 120 drivers that have gone through that now over the last few years, and it still grows. And so we've got other areas that we're focusing on with driver training. But for people that don't know, that to become a training centre, we have to be approved by the regulator, and we are one of a couple of external railway organisations that are approved by the Office of Rail and Road to deliver training and examine drivers for the industry. So we support the industry to help with driver throughput and making sure that the industry has got sufficient amount of drivers. And I'm sure we'll talk about more about what RPD does and what I do in a minute. But that's you wanted a short answer. You'll learn from me, Alan. I taught for England, and that is me over the last 25 years.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely amazing, Rob, and it's a certainly an incredible career you've had. And one of the things that I'm always interested with people in is how they get into the industry, what first attracted them to it. So for me, I fell into it through a bit of luck, if anything, and it's probably the best bit of luck I would say, and the most fortunate one I've had because I've loved my time in the rail industry. For me, I was a skill seeker. I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity to go to Plaza as an apprentice, and then things moved on from there. So what about yourself? What first attracted you and how did you get into the industry at the beginning of that career?
Well, I suppose like most teenagers, that when you leave education, you don't really know still, unless you want to go into specific professions. I don't believe that at 16 years old, when you leave school, maybe go to college, and people really still know what they want to do. So the railway, what I believe the railway is good at, is taking people for second careers, so that they've started a career, not really found their feet in that career or not enjoyed it, and given people the opportunity that after they've started a career to move into it. We've changed that now, because we've changed the age from being 21, and the industry has changed the age from being 21 to 18, so we can allow that throughput of people that can pass the tests to be able to get in. So we've kind of bridged that gap a little bit. But me, when I left education, I didn't really know. So I was doing a few different jobs. I was working as a manager in supermarkets, and working in bars and nightclubs, which, to be fair, I did enjoy. But I wanted to go into something that I could have a long career in. And don't get me wrong, I've got an education, but I didn't go to university. I didn't study specifically. At college, I did leisure and tourism, so which is partly, you learn about how infrastructure work, how the railway works, how people need to move around, but it was very broad. So a bit more background to answer this question: that my father was also in the railway, and my grandfather was also a driver. Sadly, my grandfather died early. He was 56 when he passed away, so never see a whole career. But my dad did the same. He joined the railway because that's what people did. People joined industries, and he joined in BR. So I thought, the railway's done my family very well in the past, and so my local railway was advertising, and I applied. I wasn't successful the first time. I didn't pass the psychometric test the first time. One part of it that I didn't. But again, it gives you the opportunity to come back. So 6 months later, I resat. I did some revision. I resat, and I passed. And I didn't really know where the career would take me. But the reason for joining was because it was something exciting. It was something that my family have been involved with for years. So railway has been my blood. We used to travel on the railway, because that's the mode of transport that my family were in everywhere we went. So I knew about railways. To be a driver, you had to be 21 at the time, so I couldn't apply earlier than that. And so that's why I joined the railway, or what attracted me to it. To be fair, the money, if people talk about the money of train drivers and the what the industry pays at the moment, back then it wasn't good as it is today. So it wasn't the money that made me join the railway. It was more about what stability, what progression I can have, and things like that.
And what I like about what you've mentioned there in your background and story, for anybody listening, it's about, it's not just coming in and being pigeonholed in one position. It is the opportunities that they really give you. I started off as an engineer, and I think I spoke about in my previous episode, if you asked me 25 years ago, would I be dealing with, projects and business change, I would have laughed. But it is the amount of opportunities it does produce within the railway. You're not just pigeonholed in what you start in and that's where you end your career. The opportunities are so vast. I think it's worthwhile anyone thinking about a career in rail understand just how many opportunities there are. Regarding driving, project management, engineering. I know our company has a number of vacancies, as do many on the railway just now, just because of the works that's going on with ETCS and other projects, HS1, etc. So for me, it's been an absolutely fabulous career, and as it does seem for yourself as well.
Don't take me wrong, Alan. Could I just say as well, though, that if people want to come into the railway and for the rest of their career stay in that single role, and let's just take the driving role because that was my background. That is fine. We need people to drive trains, and we have got thousands upon thousands of really skillful, really forward-thinking people that want to drive trains every day, and that's great because we need people. We can't have everyone wanting to go into management roles or training roles. We need really good train drivers, and there are lots of them out there.
Absolutely, 100% agree. So for a majority of your career, you focused on competence, training, development. So why is effective training so critical to the railway performance and its safety, in your opinion?
So my opinion is that safety and performance, they go hand in hand. So performance is really key on the railway because in my world, which is passenger operations, we have to run trains on time, and trains don't always run on time due to numerous different aspects. But if we don't focus on safety, then the performance gets hit. Because if we have an incident or have an accident, then performance goes out of the window. And so, and we're talking about company performance now, so i.e. trains running on time. But typically, most of the time, trains do run on time. So in terms of people and training, there are numerous industries throughout the world and some roles within the railway where you undertake a course and then you're qualified. And then for the rest of your career, you're doing the same thing. And you might every 2 years, 3 years get a top up of refresh of the course or something because of things might have changed. And then you're then recertified for another 2 or 3 years or
Yeah.
5, depending on the subject. But what we continually do with train drivers is that we continually help to develop. So it's not just that they've now passed their test and they've got their plastic license, their driving license or their complimentary certificate, and now they can go off and drive trains. That we continually monitor and assess drivers. And that's not from a you're doing something wrong perspective. That really is about identifying areas where we can add value, areas where we can improve, areas where we can become safer and we can improve performance. And so all of this knits hand in hand because if you've got poor performance, you probably have got poor safety and vice versa. They affect each other. And that's in my opinion. But I'm going to add to that yes, trains are delayed, but I live 30 miles away from central London. And on occasions, I have driven into central London. And for a 9 o'clock meeting, I have to leave about 5:30 in the morning to drive into London. And so getting a train that's 45 minutes into London that might be delayed by 5-10 minutes, there is still plenty of time in my day. And I can sit on the train, I can read a book, I can do some work, whereas I can't if I drive a train. So we do need to think differently about traveling on trains because yes, they might be 5 or 10 minutes late and sometimes worse. But if there is an accident on the main artery into London on a road, then it could be hours upon hours that you're stuck getting in there. So that mind shift, and I'm going to talk a bit later on about the cost of train travel because I do believe that the cost to travel should be looked at.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. And when we look at the training that we've discussed, so that's maybe 20 years, would you say, potentially you've been involved in training? For you, how's that evolved over that 20-year period?
Oh, drastically. When I first learned the rule book, the rule book is yay thick, and in fact, when I started, it was 2 rule books that were yay thick, and then over time, what we've done is we've reevaluated those rules and gone, We don't need absolutely everything written down, because traditionally the rule book has been created from where things have gone wrong, that we've improved our processes and procedures to prevent incident and accident happening, or the consequences of those. And so training has changed because we spent 6 weeks in a classroom where we read, there was 10 of us in the group, and we read line for line through the rule book. And at the end of each paragraph, each section, the instructor would then say, "Do you know that?" And we go, "Yeah, we know that." And then we'd move on to the next bit, and then they go to the next paragraph and they say, "Oh, okay, you don't need to know that because that's freight operating rules, for example. So cross that out." So we'd sit there and cross that out, and then we'd go to the next page, and this cycle would happen. And at the end of the week, we'd have a little test and go, "Yeah, great, you know that." And it was very much memory, where you had to memorize the rules and memorize the procedures, which we do still have to do that, I'll hasten to add, but it's more important that you remember the things that you need to do and support people where it's an infrequent activity. So what else can we put in place from a safety perspective again to help people? So rather than just relying on the human brain, which the human brain, as we know, is quite fallible, you can't remember everything. If you're in a high stressful situation, how can you remember these 5 things that you need to do? So how do we now support, and this is how it's moved on, we've got more processes and procedures to be able to support people in their workplace. So that might be, we've got someone sitting in a control center where if there's a train fault, you can ring up and speak to someone. We develop at RPD fault finding apps where that takes some of that thought process away in a stressful situation. If you imagine a train that's stopped because of a train failure, and you've got 1,000 passengers on the train, and you've now got to try and get that train moving. And if you're trying to do that from memory, that can become quite stressful. And I had a few when I was a driver of train failures, so I remember it clearly, that stress that you're under. But can we help people? So using technology where you've got an app that says, what indications have you got in the cab? And it might be this light, that light, that light. So you can put that in. And then within 15 seconds, it says, "Have you contacted the signaller?" Oh, must contact the signaller. I've just stopped at whatever location. And then it goes, diagnose this, diagnose that. It's likely to be this. So within about a minute and a half, that you can come to a solution. Then, if that's not the reason, then you need recovery. You need to be able to get the train moving. So you move into a different process. And so can we support people better? I think we are now supporting people better, and that's always continually improving, because our job as consultants is to help companies and help the industry to move forward with their processes and procedures, rather than being a procedure that they've had for the last 10 years and it hasn't evolved and changed. So we've gone from being a very memory focused way of training to a more experiential way of learning and supporting people along the way with things that they don't do as frequently.
Find what you've described. I showed just that I take the PTS is very much that's a memory thing. You know, you go in every 2 years, is it? And I'm always looking at the recap just to remind me. And I feel that's very much memory based, and there's not much of that more genuine learning beyond it. So what you're describing there, and what I like here is it's that genuine learning culture. It's not just taking your rule book and passing something. It's not just meeting the mandatory requirements. It's going above and beyond that to ensure, you know, a greater learning within businesses, within organisations, which is going to, in my opinion, it always leads to a safer environment, a more efficient environment. So if something does go wrong, it's getting out of that quicker. It's being in a more safer, pragmatic approach. It's just so beneficial. So it's great to hear from yourself how that's evolved and how it's still continuing to evolve from 20 years ago, the modern day, and into the future.
take PTS that you've just there. So for people that are listening that aren't within the railway, PTS, personal track safety, is the basic piece of information that you have to make sure that you are safe when you are walking or working around the railway. And there are different forms of that, but to keep it simple. So people have PTS. Now, as a train driver, as a track worker, train drivers and track workers, they're going on the track every day. And so they're gaining those memory experiences all the time. But there are some people that gain PTS that need it for their job that won't necessarily walk trackside. So
Yeah.
how do we manage that? They're not undertaking those activities every day. So how do we manage that going forward? Well, we might have to have top-up sessions with them. So, for example, on how to make an emergency call, which is
Yeah.
part of the personal track safety requirements. Or when they go trackside, create an experience log, an experience record. Our online competence learning and management system, Assure, has experience records built in that as an individual, when you go and experience something, and in this case, we're talking personal track safety, when you experience that, create a log, create a record of that event. What happened? What did I learn? And what can I do better next time? So that, one, it forms part of your competence. But secondly, you can reflect back on that. And when you go for your recertification, you've got things there that you can reflect back on rather than just, again, relying on memory that, I barely remember things that happened 3 weeks ago, let alone 2 years ago.
Yeah, and what you've mentioned there is regarding the Assure system. So I find myself in that situation. So now I've moved more from being on the bar list to more office based. Although I'm still out there reasonably regularly, it's not my previous role where every shift was on the bar list. So I've had to use that system. I've had to use my experience log to showcase I'm working in such and such a possession, working this machine, etc. And it is key. And it is a challenge that companies may face regarding maintaining their workforce competence. But as you've described, that is a great way of documenting it, logging it, and evidencing what you've done, and just as a reminder of where you've been, so that you're not just down at that bare mandatory compliance of go over the hump, pass it, and it's just that development and evolution of it. No, that's brilliant. And for you, if you could summarise, what does great railway training look like in practice for you?
Okay, so great railway training practice. I think if we've got the amazing opportunity to use simulators, high definition, high fidelity simulators, that we've got more techniques and tools, so we can use animation and we can use VR and we can use all of the advantages, but people still have to get those experiences. So our training, for example, we make sure that our trainees get on trains very, very early on. Again, going back to when I became a driver, we had our 2 weeks of induction, we had 6 weeks rules, then we did a couple of other minor modules, and then we got our first access on a train about 3 months into our training program. So when we were in the rules, and and if I said to you, and I'm sure that you'll know this, Alan, but if I said to you, picture a 4-aspect color light signal with a number 1 junction indicator, you would know exactly what I was talking about. But if we take a trainee that in a rules environment, after the first week, we're then moving into basic railway signalling, and we say, right, we're going to talk about 4-aspect color light signaling today. And so it's 4 aspects. It's got four lights that are on it, and they display a double yellow, a single yellow, a green, and a red. And then we've got a junction indicator. It's got 5 white lights on. Okay, have you got that? They go, yeah, we've got that. But if they've already gained an experience of being in the front of a train and then observing what the sequence of signals are to get to a red light, or from a double yellow, a single yellow, a red, for example, then when it comes to the training, they've already gained an experience. When they come to training, that training becomes a lot easier because they've got something to reflect back on. So all of ours, not just driver courses, but all of our courses rely heavily on experience. And so if you haven't had that experience before, then we support people to get experience. So our driver training program, and your company is one of the companies that we've supported the drivers for, is that
Yeah.
the very first 4 weeks of training, is about gaining experience. So they have a logbook, whether that be an online logbook or a paper version logbook, and they go and gain experiences. There's a number of questions, a number of scenarios, and it might be go and visit a signal box, go to your control center and ask these 5 questions about it, understand what a signaler's role does. Take a picture from a platform of a 4-aspect color light signal. Identify what a temporary speed restriction warning indicator looks like. And things like that. So that we're already setting, and they might mean not a lot to the people when they're going out there. And they'd have to rely on other people to go, can you point me in the right direction of what is that a 4-aspect color light signal? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So using other people's experiences as well. But what that does, and I'm going to reiterate what I said, that helps when you get into the classroom environment and you're then talking about railway operations, that people fundamentally know more and understand more about what you're talking about, rather than just learning the rules and learning it by rote and not really fully understanding. To support that, though, we use a sim kit. And for people out there that don't know what a sim kit is, it is a very basic track layout with little widgets, and I'm sure we can put a picture up on screen after this of what the sim kit looks like. Well, Rail Professional Development, we produce these and supply these to the industry. We sell probably 30 to 40 packs of these a year to the industry, not just in the UK, but worldwide. Because if, again, we're talking about signaling sequences, we can say to a trainee driver, using the rule book, set up a 4-aspect color light signaling sequence and work a train through it. And so they're just little bits of plastic that they're moving through, and then they're turning the signals to understand that, well, when the train goes past the signal behind it goes to red because that's the protection of that train. Well, how does that work? Well, that works with track circuits. So let's draw on the map what a track circuit would look like, and why, when a train gets into that track circuit, that the signal in the rear turns to danger to protect the train. So again, they're getting experiences, they're getting visuals in a very, very simple way, rather than being a PowerPoint that's led by the trainer that's getting repetitive strain injury on their thumb from clicking slide by slide by slide or animation. Our PowerPoints, we do have PowerPoints within our training, but they are to set up a task, to consolidate what we've done, and to, if there needs to be any visuals that come around that. So in fact, when I first went into training, we changed from First Great Eastern to National Express East Anglia, which is when the franchise ended and a new operator took over. And one of my first jobs was to rebrand all of our PowerPoint slides. So take away the first group sign that was on there and put the National Express sign on, which typically happened. Obviously, there are ways of doing that now, which saves a lot of time, but we had to make sure that it was all branded correctly. And there was over 2,000 PowerPoint slides that had to be checked for branding. And obviously, we know ways of doing that quicker now, but that in itself took a long time to do. But can you imagine sitting there on a training course and clicking through 2,000 slides over a period of 4 to 5 weeks, where our training program now, probably, I reckon, maximum we have over our training program, I'm going to say conservatively, maybe 200, 250 slides.
Yeah. And I think it just highlights, I mean, for me, that blended approach is, for someone like myself, my nature, the way that I take learning is amazing. I'm capable of sitting in a classroom and you always hear death by PowerPoint, but for me, we've all been in a situation where we've been on a course, and I will add, actually, not so recently, but previously, maybe years ago, where you maybe had your lunch, you've come back, and you've got that death by PowerPoint, and it's a struggle for the candidate. It's probably a struggle for the trainer, because he's got to pick up that classroom. I think what you says, it is the blended approach is the way to learn and train. And although I'm not a driver background, and I've got a whole respect for it, given the roles that I have done, and been sat next to drivers for 15 years out there going on shifts and stuff. For me, I can relate to, just when you mentioned them going out on track side, having a look at that signal, they might need to be pointed to, as you've mentioned, but when they come back in the classroom and you're discovering it, just that link to actually seeing it in the real world, for me, that kind of learning, it must just elevate it and make it move so quicker and faster. And in my opinion.
Yeah, linking it to your experiences, that if we take a siding and on the main line, for people that already or don't know, that points move across. So the points where one train go from one line to another automatically are moved due to the signalling systems or etc. But in a siding, they're normally hand points. A person would walk along and pull a set of points. Now, if we put a PowerPoint slide together that showed this is a point handle and this is how you must stand, and you grab the handle like this, and you must make that you have got a sturdy footing, and then pull the handle, making sure you don't injure your back. Right, now we're going to go out to the depot and we're going to do that. That's one way of training. Okay, and that can be fine. Or we can go out and say we need to move this set of points from here, this position to this position. But what I'm going to tell you first is some safety things. So make sure that you've got sturdy footing, and it could be a foot in this position, foot in this position. Make sure you hold it with both hands and leverage, because you need to protect your back. Now, what I'd like you to do is try and pull that set of points.
Yeah.
So and we call that safety discovery learning. So we've highlighted some safety aspects. We want to make sure people are safe, so we've controlled it, but we want people to gain their experiences, and they might do it wrong. They might do it right. So they might pull the set of points and say the points don't go fully across. So then we consider ourselves, go, okay, so what do you need to do now to ensure that the points are fully across? Okay, well, I'll pull it again. Okay, let's try that. Pull the points again. Okay, they've gone back again. So how do we now do it? And so on. And so it's not just about telling people. The old way of doing it is I tell you to do it, so you do it. Which is it's an old military way of training, that I tell you how to do it, and now you must go and do that. Great, you can now do it. Whereas what we're doing, we're flipping that on its head and saying, gain some experiences, learn from those experiences, the mistakes and the successes, and then evaluate that and say, well, what are you going to do different next time? Okay, I'm going to look down the track and make sure that it's safe to go, or I'm going to make sure the points are fully across, or that there's no ballast that's caught within the points, and so on. And so as long as you do that cycle of gaining an experience, evaluating what you've done, and then looking at, well, if I was to do this again, how can I perform better? How can I do it better next time? Then the cycle starts again. You undertake it and you go, okay, I did that really well, but how can I push myself and improve that? And if we take that to every aspect of our own competencies, we should all continually improve.
Absolutely. Then, one of the things that you touched on there as well when we were discussing, from a driver perspective, and this doesn't necessarily fall within the driving, this just follows in a continuous learning. We discuss about trainee drivers maybe going back into their organisations and then going through that practical element, getting that experience. That would be with mentors and coaching. How important is that stage for developing the next generation? And that doesn't need to be on drivers particularly, because just that experience and being under someone and getting that guidance from a mentor coaching perspective, just how important is that for the next generation?
Yeah, I think it hands down is really important that we use people as experiences. And so we've got instructors in whatever field that might be, and we touched there on the fitters who repair. You've got the engineers, the operators, you've got train drivers, station staff, and so on. That you have to rely on people's experiences to help you to sometimes conceptualize what is actually happening at the time. And what we've actually done really well over the last, I'm going to say 10 to 15 years, is actually develop the skills of those individuals as well. Because traditionally what they've been is, if we've got a good engineer, then that engineer can be a good DI, a good instructor, or that engineer could be a good manager. But what skills does that person now need that they haven't had before, that they now need to help them with instructing and teaching people? So we relied on people's experience to be, you're a good in whatever role you're doing, so you would be a really good, go away and now teach them. And so all we relied on there is experiences. And although that's great, and it is really important, that their experiences might be different to other people. So how do you engage with people? How do you articulate what you're trying to get across to people in a safe way? Are you just telling them what to do, or are you allowing them to make those mistakes? if you like, pushing the boundaries of not allowing them to make catastrophic mistakes, but allowing to make mistakes so they can learn from that in a safe way. And so what we've done, again, it's important that people have experience to be able to reflect back on. But what it also gives, though, is people that comfort blanket. So if you're new into the industry and you've got someone that's got, 5, 10, 15 years worth of experience, it gives you a little bit of a comfort blanket that actually they're gonna help if something goes wrong, and they're gonna hopefully prevent anything from going wrong. Not always the case. But we've got this thing called the 3 C's, and it's about competence, confidence, and commitment. And so some people come with really high confidence, but actually their competence is really, really low. And so those two are not in parallel. Likewise, someone could come from really high competence, they've got a lot of knowledge, but their confidence is really low. And so they could have incidents. And our job as trainers, mentors, leaders is to help their confidence and competence grow at the same time. Now, the other C in that was about commitment, and people do bring commitment. But if you bring the commitment, then we can train people and we can build people's confidence and we can build people's competence to become safe railway people. But you do need that from people that have got experience. And one of the, I'm going to say, the fallacies of modern technology is that it will take away the actual driving of a train. And so if we can bring in VR and if we can bring simulators, then why do we need to go and undertake practical handling? I think is a load of nonsense. People need to be able to drive a train, learn how to handle a train, learn how to stop a train, learn how to start a train in all different conditions that you can't completely replicate on a simulator. Yes, you can get some experiences on a simulator, and procedurally you can follow through some degraded emergency scenarios on the simulator. And a simulator is a really good tool, but all of these new advances in technology that we've got and still continually improve, you can't just take one of those and say, now that replaces this.
Yeah.
These are support mechanisms that support the overall competence, and people need, as I said a minute ago, experiences. So people need to get on trains. People need to be gaining those experiences, not just sitting on a computer screen learning a route, for example.
Yeah, no, fully agree. It's an interesting, without going into too much detail, but we find ourselves there within our company, procuring simulators and looking at what they provide, etc. However, within the schedules of delivery to getting people competent, there is that element of practical that won't come away from the schedule. That is a requirement, because the simulators are amazing. What they do, the degraded, it's not as if we can be on the East Coast Main Line and then phone, the signaller up in York Walk and say, oh, can you provide me with this degraded scenario? So obviously the simulators are key, as you've mentioned, for those degraded moments, but the practical element, that's invaluable. That should never be taken away. And I don't think, nor do I think, and I say this, got to be proved wrong probably somewhere down the future in the next 30, 50 years, but nor should the practical element disappear and something become solely on a product such as a simulator, etc. Because it's invaluable going out, getting that real life experience of what you're learning.
Well, take, for example, you said there about the East Coast Main Line. The East Coast Main Line currently is under a resignaling project, bringing in ETCS, that we're heavily involved with the development of the training materials for the freight and the M&E and charter and heritage sector. That signalling system, when that first came about, people went, well, you don't need to understand the routes anymore because all of your indications are in the cab. And from early on, railway operators, and well, we still really need to know about the routes and about the geographical layout of the route, even though this in-cab signalling system is telling us how fast we need to go and it's monitoring us at that speed. We still need to understand about the routes. But the way I liken this is that it's not your traditional way of route learning, so learning a route. It's the differences now that you need to know with regards to in-cab signaling. So you still need to know locations. You still need to know where junctions and crossovers. You still need to know gradients. You still need to know low adhesion areas, because although the system is telling you, how fast that you can go and so on, that you still need to know where you are. You still need to know the route. So it becomes different, and we need to evolve as an industry, and people are, but we need to evolve, sorry, to the new ways of doing stuff, and not just because we've done it for the last 20 years that way. That's the tried and tested way of doing it. Let's try something new. And if it doesn't work, we change it again.
Oh, absolutely. And then just touching back on something you've said is regarding the leaders, the sort of mentors and changers in the skill sets they've had. Because when people talk about leadership, my opinion, when I talk to a lot of people, or people talk to me about leadership, in their heads, it's always about the top of the org chart, the MDs, director, more senior roles. For me, within not just the railway, just in life in general, leaders come from everywhere. I coach my daughter's under 10s team. There's leaders on that pitch, even at that age. And they're such young, they're only 9, 10-year-old girls. I see leaders there just with some of the skill sets and some of the attributes that they've got. And I think it's important that people understand that you can be a leader at any level. And for you, what advice would you give someone aspiring to move into a leadership position within rail? And when I say leadership, whether that is leading at a higher level, or leading through mentoring, or leading through training, example, what would your advice be to them?
Yeah, so I suppose from a leadership, as you quite rightly said there, leadership comes in all different shapes and sizes. But fundamentally, leadership for me is about people. And so good leadership is knowing people, knowing how to interact with people, and just understanding about people. Processes and procedures are a measure, but if you can engage with people, and one of the greatest leaders that I've worked with in the past is he was the managing director of Elizabeth Line at the time, and that's a guy called Steve Murphy. And I remember early on in the startup of, again, what was TfL Rail, that on the 31st of May 2015, we were going live with TfL Rail. We was in these plush offices in London. Well, when I say plush offices, they were offices that were in the city of London. So they were pretty nice offices that was full of desks, full of offices and private offices that were all of the directors. And the first thing that Steve, and I remember clearly saying, was, we've got all of these offices in here. He said, and I'm going to direct this to my leadership team. He said, if you are in your office, we've got a problem. He said, I want you out on the patch. I want you meeting people. I want you to be engaging with people. I don't want you sitting in your office. And in fact, even though your name is on that office door, if any of the other departments want to use those offices for meeting rooms, they can, because you need to be out there.
Yeah.
Now, Steve was very, very good at rallying people, and he still is now, he's still within the industry, rallying people and getting the best out of people. But one thing Steve knew what to do is how to speak to people. And he would go to the depots and he would remember people, bearing in mind that we had a workforce at the time of probably 150 people at the time, that he would know every single one. He would go to the depot, he would talk to drivers, he would talk to station staff, he would talk to cleaners, but he knew their names, and and they loved that. And that was so if we could take anything out of that, it's about engaging with people.
Yeah.
Which he was very good at. Don't get me wrong, he was also very good at the other leadership, about making sure that things were done on time.
Yeah.
But again, done in a nice way, not a dictatorial way, to get the best out of people. So it felt like a family. It felt like that we were all part of, we all had the same aspirations to run this railway, and it worked. And so, and then when we were recruiting, and as I said earlier on, we had our first year of trainee drivers was about 120 trainee drivers, which was a lot of drivers when we've still got very limited infrastructure, limited facilities, etc. We had to work a great plan. But day one of that course, Steve would go into and Les Bird, who was my director, would go into every single training course. They would introduce themselves, not as I'm the managing director of this company and I'm the director of operations, and so you must look up to me. It was about, if you've got any problems, come to me. If anything happens, tell us about it.
Yeah.
Because if you tell us about something, then we can do something about it. So if you, an example, if someone has an accident, tell us about it, because we can learn from that accident and we can help make sure that accident doesn't happen again. But if you lie and if you hide from that, then the trust is broken.
Yeah.
So we want to build that trust from the outset. We want you to talk to us. We want to be able to help you. And that's a way of improving, because you learn from your mistakes, rather than people being in fear of that they do something wrong, they're going to be sacked or they're going to be, out the door. So from a leadership perspective, I would say he's one of a few people that I can say, him and Les Bird were, for me, two people that were great leaders, different leaders to what we'd experienced in the past with leadership within the railway.
Yeah. And for me, it's people, because I've worked with great leaders, I've worked with some not so great leaders. And the only difference is, like you say, there's two sides of it. There is the leadership/management side of getting the job done, but ultimately it's the people side. And where the ones didn't quite hit the mark was down to the people side. And for me, I have this discussion with a lot of people. It's like, people are the main assets of the organisation. They're the people that make it drive. And I think was it Richard Branson, I believe, at Virgin, had mentioned about, look after your people, have that relationship with them, and they'll look after the business and everything goes forward. And that ultimately describes the culture that you've experienced through Steve when you worked with him. He created that culture where it was people orientated. It had that family feel. They felt trusted and valued. But ultimately, it all just feeds into creating that safe culture as well, where I'm assuming with what you're saying, staff did feel that there was an open door, that they could approach that higher level and have those discussions. And as you say, come to us, not so that we can reprimand, but so that we can learn. If something has gone wrong, well, it's not about who was it, what we're going to do to them. That may have been the past before I've come on the railway and stuff as well, but it should be about the people. Okay, something's went wrong. What's happened? What's the impact? What can we learn from it? And creating that safe environment. And for me, the gentleman that you've explained there has just done that down to a T. And that feels like the perfect place to bring part one of my conversation with Rob to a close. When we sat down to record this, the intention was to produce one episode, but 90 minutes later, it was obvious there was simply too much in this conversation to cut out, and we're definitely not finished yet. In part two, Rob and I picked the conversation straight back up, going deeper into his experiences, his views on the industry, and what he believes we need to be doing now to develop the people who will shape the railway of tomorrow. There are some fantastic insights still to come, and a few moments that really made me think differently as well. So make sure you're following Trackside Conversations, because you won't want to miss the second half of this one. My thanks to Rob for such an open and engaging conversation, and I'll leave the rest for part two. Until next time, keep safe, and I'll see you trackside.